In September of the last year, the employer, Jack Ronan, and Vita Cortex informed the employees of that plant that he was going to make them redundant in December. At that time, the discussions were that the employees would receive 2.9 weeks for every year that they had worked, up to 40 years in some instances. During the period of September to December, he said that he was in discussion with NAMA with regard to paying out the sum of money, which in total came to 1.2 billion, and with redundancy payments having tax relief would come in around 480,000 euros. Less than 500,000 euros was Jack Ronan's liability here. During that period, he said that he was in ongoing discussions with NAMA and in ongoing discussions with the workers. In fact, I came in here to Dáil on the 14th of December and exposed this ruse. NAMA at no moment in time said that they were going to meet these payments because they were held in a separate account. And nobody knows better than Jack Ronan that NAMA are not a liable organisation here. Why? Because Jack Ronan employed a financial company a number of years ago to reconstructure his company, and to do so in such a way that liability would not travel from one company to another. So nobody knows better than Jack Ronan that that NAMA claim was a ruse and continues to be a ruse. And the fact of the matter here is that Jack Ronan and his company needs to fork up the money and pay out the 480,000 euros. Also, what needs to happen here is that there needs to be a corporate examination of how this company actually restructured itself. The company at presently is claiming that it has an inability to pay. That is one aspect. That's Vita Cortex Cork. There is Vita Cortex Dublin, there's Vita Cortex Athlone, there's Vita Cortex Belfast, and there's Vita Cortex Dublin. And there are a host of other companies to which the same directors are actually in charge of, who all seem to be the same shareholders and the same directors, yet are all separate companies. Now, regardless of who pays this money, and it could well be the Department of Social Welfare will pay the 2 weeks statutory redundancy to these workers, and the department will meet its obligations if it does arrive in that place. There has to be a forensic examination of this company carried out to establish the interconnectivity between the different aspects of Vita Cortex holdings, and to ensure that if the taxpayer is ponying up, that it is the last court of recourse. Now, to conclude, Ciaran Lynch, there is a corporate structure argument here, and I'd like to know, if any time, was there any correspondence either by the department, by the union, or by any other entity to the Director of Corporate Affairs to have an examination of the corporate governance of this company asked as well? And I welcome what the LRC are saying this evening, and the reason is why. If Jack Ronan gets off the hook by the way that that company restructured his finances for him, we will see other companies across the country taking the same model on board and escaping their liabilities, and the state ponying up and more circumstances. So it's critical that that examination is actually carried out.
Thanks, Deputy.
My very final point on this to the Minister. Following that examination, we also have to have a look at to see if legislation is now required to ensure that the type of practice that is being carried out, and I would state that legally by Jack Ronan, in terms of corporate governance, is examined to ensure that laws are changed to ensure that we don't see the type of skullduggery that has been engaged by his company to renege on his payments to these employees.
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you,
maximum of 4 minutes.
Thank you, Ciaran Lynch, and just to thank the deputies for raising this issue, and quite a number of points have been raised in each of the contributions. I want to thank the deputies for raising the important matter, and thank you for the opportunity to respond. I am concerned at the continuing situation at the Vita Cortex factory in Cork, which has involved workers at the plant engaging in a sit-in since the 16th of December last, arising from a dispute with their employer over redundancy payments. The workers involved in the Vita Cortex sit-in are seeking severance terms of 2.9 weeks pay per year of service, inclusive of statutory redundancy in line with previous redundancy deals at the company, which they say will amount to a total of 1.2 million. We know that the workers had been offered a paltry sum of €1,500 to leave the premises over the Christmas period, and they rightly rejected this offer, claiming that the company would use their absence to remove important machinery and stock. The company says it told workers their redundancy would have to come from the state's social insurance fund unless NAMA would agree to release 2.5 million held on deposit by another Vita Cortex firm on foot of an AIB loan taken over by NAMA. However, NAMA issued a statement indicating that these funds were put out of reach of the Vita Cortex group, not by NAMA but by AIB, 2.5 years ago when they were pledged as security for loans. While NAMA stated that it empathises with the Vita Cortex workers, and I quote, "Unfortunately and legally, it cannot simply use charged deposit funds pledged against loans of one company to meet costs incurred by a separate legal entity." Unquote. NAMA also stated that it was the responsibility of the owners and shareholders of Vita Cortex to resolve this situation, and it's very hard to disagree with that contention. In the interest of achieving a resolution in this dispute, Minister Bruton urged both parties to avail of the state's industrial relations machinery as soon as possible, with a view to exploring ways of resolving the issues in dispute. Officials from my department were in contact with the workers' union representatives over the holiday period in efforts to clarify the issues involved and to make them aware that the industrial relations machinery of the state is available to them to help them resolve the dispute. In this context, I understand that the Labour Relations Commission has today invited both parties to meet in Cork next Tuesday to clarify the facts of the situation and, against that background, to explore with the parties the potential for moving forward. I welcome the initiative by the LRC and would urge both parties to engage constructively in the process, and in my opinion, engagement with the state's industrial relations machinery offers the best way at this point in time. I will leave it at that for now, Ciaran Corla, just to allow for a supplementary question.
Ciaran Corla, the principal point here is that the primary person with responsibility to these workers is Vita Cortex and Jack Ronan as the major shareholder in that. And before any suggestion that the state should be covering these costs, every stone should be turned over to make sure that he cannot avoid those costs. Unfortunately, or regrettably, Mr. Ronan, through Vita Cortex, has restructured that company in such a fashion that that liability might not actually be able to be realised. However, on the week the factory closed, a significant piece of machinery was moved from the plant in Cork to Athlone. It's still hard to establish as to how that piece of machinery actually travelled up the road. From my understanding, the plant in Athlone is a separate company, but I do not know if actually an invoice or a bill or some charge was actually put on the transference of that machinery. Now, if that machine transferred to another plant, it means there's a cost arising from it, and I believe they want to transfer further machinery up the road to Athlone as well. So the monies accrued out of those transference of machineries can meet the costs of the redundancy payments, and I think any income that Mr. Ronan derives from stripping down the plant on the Kinsale Road should actually be earmarked and ring-fenced. So in concluding my comments, I welcome the LRC's announcement today. I do believe, however, that the LRC should engage the offices of the Governor of Corporate Governance into his offices as well, because I do think that there are serious concerns with regard to corporate governance in this country and future employers' actions that would actually enable them to avoid their payments in a similar way to which Vita Cortex presently seem to be doing so.
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you, Ciaran Corla. The ultimate aim here is to ensure that the rights of workers are vindicated, and I think we all have that interest at heart. The second aim is to ensure that corporate social responsibility is adhered to and that there is some degree of corporate governance. I agree with the deputies in relation to the perceived Byzantine structures of Vita Cortex. We must also remember that Vita Cortex was also a recipient of state funding, and I think it would be in the interest of this state to ensure that we can shine a light on those companies in some way, and if there is a mechanism by which a query could be made to the Director of Corporate Enforcement in relation to concerns that people have about the company structure, then I would actively encourage people to make such a query to the Director in that sense. But ultimately, it's impossible to say at this stage what the premise of the discussions will be as between the two sides with the LRC. The LRC has extended the invitation just today, and I would hope that both parties would agree to engaging in that process, and I think we should see where we can go from there. There are other points which have been raised in relation to Minister Bruton meeting with both sides or with management of the company. That's something that I'll take back to Minister Bruton, but I think ultimately here what we need to ensure is that the state will use its force in a positive sense to try and ensure that the workers' rights are vindicated, and we're not going to rest on that particular point.
I would be too pleased to help out by perhaps, if after the other discussions have taken place, if you wish to raise the matter again, I'll consider it. favourably.
May I, with your indulgence, just clarify the point in relation to the legal basis and NAMA? That's an issue that I acknowledge that has been made by Deputy Martin, and I will bring that to Minister Bruton also.
Thank you.